Hello and welcome to the Tangy Stitches Knitting Podcast. My name is Claire and this is episode number 7. And in today's episode, I will be talking about 2 finished objects, an update on one of the whips that I had from last time because 2 of them are now finished objects. And I also have a couple of new cast-ons to talk about, as well as some more yarn acquisitions and future plans. So sit back, relax, grab your knitting needles, and let's get started. The first finished object that I wanted to talk about is the Nolita Tank by Tori Yu. This is a pattern that I test knit, and I finished my version a couple of weeks ago, and the pattern is now out, so you can also knit a Nolita tank. This is a sporty summer tank top that is knit up in a DK weight gauge and has this really cool trim around the neck and also the armhole that is in a contrast color. This is supposed to be a 20 stitch gauge, but unfortunately, when I measured my gauge of my finished object, I realized that I was slightly off gauge. So my tank top has 22 stitches per 4 inches. And I don't remember what the row gauge was, but it also was a little bit off. And because I knit mine slightly off gauge, then it came out slightly smaller than the intended measurements. So I think I ended up with 2 inches of negative ease instead of 0 inches of ease. And the other thing that happened because my row gauge was off is that the armholes are maybe, I think they're less than an inch off, but they're just slightly smaller than I would have liked. This tank top does fit still and I still can wear it, but I can tell that the armholes are a little bit tight. I would prefer them to be a little bit bigger, and the overall fit is more fitted than was intended, I guess. I brought this knit with me on my trip to New York, so it was pretty fun to be able to work on the Nolita tank while I was in New York. And after I finished it, the first time I wore it, I actually also took it out to Brooklyn General Store, which is one of the local yarn stores that is there. And I did buy some yarn at Brooklyn General Store, and I have swatched those up because I have projects for them, so I will get to that later. But I am able to wear this tank top. I think it's just mostly the armholes that are slightly too small. I think I really do want to knit another tank because I really like this design, and I think a bunch of other test knitters knit this, and there were some really cool color combinations that were chosen, and I would like to knit another one and choose fun colors for them. I think I ended up knitting mine primarily in this color because I wanted to use up some yarn that was already in stash because I had already bought so much yarn this year, and I guess I have continued to buy more yarn. But the yarn that I used for this is Rowan Soft Yak DK, and this is a majority cotton yarn with a little bit of yak, and the brown contrast color is this Rowan hand knit cotton. And I originally bought these yarns to knit a colorwork baby sweater, so I had those yarns in stash when I saw this test knit come up on my feed, so I ended up going with those yarns. But I would like to knit another one. I think I would want to knit it maybe in a slightly lighter weight yarn too, I think the soft yak DK is a little bit of a heavier DK weight yarn. It's a chainette construction, so it's not that it's heavier weight, but it is kind of thicker. I think if I had knit this on gauge at 20 stitches, it would have been a little bit less thick. But I would really like to try knitting this up in a different yarn. The suggested yarn for this pattern is Sandnes Garn Laine, which I made a swatch of because I had some leftover yarn from another project. If I compare this swatch with the fabric of my tank, it's definitely much thinner, and I think you can see in the sample photos too how much more drapey Tori's sample looks compared to this, which is on like the thicker side. But overall, the pattern was really well written, and I really do love this design, so I really am thinking that I'm gonna knit another one. It also worked up really fast. I guess what else is there to say about the design? One thing that I changed is that for the contrast color in the pattern, you go down a needle size to do that contrast color, but I decided that I wanted my contrast color to show up even more, so I ended up staying with the same needle size so that it gives it a slightly thicker band. And I think I knit the number of stitches for the contrast color exactly to pattern, but I just didn't size down the needles. And the neckline and armholes and also the bottom are all finished with an I-cord edge. So this is my Nolita tank, and I hope that I'll be able to make another one this summer. The second finished object that I want to talk about is the Fleur Tee, which is the t-shirt that I'm wearing right now, and it is a pattern by Woolbird Knits, and I just finished it a couple of days ago, so this is the first time I'm actually wearing it, and I love it. It's so good. This is a t-shirt pattern that has this all over lace pointelle pattern. So there are eyelets alternating with columns of broken rib, and the pattern goes all around the t-shirt. And it is a slightly cropped t-shirt. I think I made mine a little bit longer than the pattern suggests, or in the pattern there's actually two lengths that she suggests, one for a cropped version and one for a more standard t-shirt version, but of course you can knit it to whatever length that you want. This pattern is knit from the bottom up, so you do have to be a little bit careful when you're knitting the body length to get it to the length that you want, because you have to decide when you're gonna split for the front and the back. So in terms of the construction, it's bottom up, and then you split here at the bottom of the sleeves for the front and for the back. One thing about the pattern is that for the smaller sizes, I think maybe for the first 3 sizes, but definitely for the first size, which is the size that I knit, though I did knit it off gauge, so yeah, I knit the size 1, but at a slightly larger gauge in order to get the measurements of about the size 2. But this is true for at least size 1 and 2, maybe 3, which is that you don't actually cast on any stitches at the underarm or do any kind of shaping for the armhole at the sleeve. So what happens is that when you're knitting the front and the back, after you have split for the front and the back, then it basically is a rectangle where the sleeves are then kind of just attached to them. Because usually in like a sweater or other construction patterns, what you have is some shaping for the underarm, and maybe some cast on stitches too. So there's some separation between the front and back. Whereas here, there really is none of that. So I can kind of maybe show what that looks like. I can't really see because this little screen of the camera is too small. But basically, there's like a middle point where you split, and that is just where it's split. I think the reason that it's written like that for the smallest sizes is because the designer is trying to keep everything in pattern where you're not, say, decreasing into the pattern. So if you were to start decreasing here at the this part of the underarm, then you would kind of cut into this column of the lace, and maybe that would be kind of hard to figure out in terms of writing the pattern. But if I were to knit this again or change anything about it, I think what I would want to do is do a little bit of shaping for the underarm, or maybe it's not that you would cast on stitches when you're knitting bottom up, it's that you would knit the front and the back while leaving some stitches for that underarm. And I think that would give the sleeve a slightly better fit. It's not uncomfortable, but I think the sleeve definitely is a little bit tight because there is none of that shaping. The yarn that I used is Peninsula Yarn, which is a local hand dyer in cotton wool fingering. And I think with this yarn in the San Francisco Bay Area climate, it'll be pretty comfortable. I have been wearing this around for most of the day today, and the fact that the underarm is so close hasn't really bothered me too much, but I could see that in warmer climates or hotter climates, it might be even more uncomfortable to have such a tight fitting underarm if it's really hot, or if you're using maybe a warmer fiber. Another part of the fit that maybe I would adjust in the future, or I always think this, that there are things that I want to change about certain knits, but then I also think, will I ever get to it? Because there's so many more projects that I want to work on that it's hard to decide to take the time to kind of redo something that's already done. And it was even the case when I still didn't cast off or weave in the ends. When I did knit this and split for the front and the back, I at that point already knew that, you know, there was no underarm shaping and that it would likely be tight, but I didn't feel confident enough to adjust the pattern on my own at that point. But I think with experience and with knitting more patterns, I am getting to a point where I feel like I would be confident enough to change the pattern and to make adjustments, and maybe even make them without first having to knit the pattern as written and then see what's wrong and then re-knit it, but to like already know ahead of time, to already know by just reading the pattern that it's likely going to be something that I want to change. So when I did split and knit the front and the back, I left it like that for a very long time. Actually, I had seamed it up too. So I had finished the back, finished the front two panels, or finished both the fronts, and then seamed the shoulders up. And at that point, I kind of knew that that sleeve was going to be pretty tight because you could see the shape of it. It's just flat with no underarm shaping. And I left it like that for probably about a week and a half because I was trying to decide what I wanted to do and whether I wanted to undo the knitting that I had done for the front and back. But ultimately, I just decided to cast on the sleeves and see how it would go. And I think it did come out pretty well, though I do think it would be better if it did have some underarm shaping. I think if you wanted to modify the pattern and put in underarm shaping, you would have to think about how much of this lace pattern you would cut in. And if you were to also kind of do the underarm shaping and do some decreases here, the shoulder cap or sleeve cap might also change. Though I think with the way that the short rows are written for the sleeve cap, that it would work, even if this were kind of higher up. And actually for me, this, where the sleeve cap starts, is really close to the edge of my shoulders, whereas I think in the designer's sample picture, the front and back panel are slightly over the edge of the shoulder. But yeah, so the way that the sleeves are worked is that you pick up stitches all the way around and then you're working short rows. So basically shaping the sleeve cap by working short rows here all the way around. There is maybe a little bit of extra fabric right here at the sleeve, and I think that the way that you could remove this extra fabric is basically to end the short rows sooner. So instead of kind of going back and forth all the way around to the bottom of the sleeve, if you ended the short rows somewhere around here, then I don't think that you would have this extra fabric. And maybe that's also something that I would like to go back and change in an ideal world, but I'm not sure that I'm gonna do that. I would consider knitting this pattern again though, because I do really enjoy just the pattern of it, the pointelle lace and the broken rib columns, and I think it was both really fun to work on and had a really good outcome in terms of the fabric. So maybe that's something I would knit again. The other thing that I'll mention is that the pattern is meant to be knit on 2.5 millimeter needles, but I ended up knitting mine on 2.75. And the main reason that I did that was because I knit up two swatches, one on the 2.5 and one on the 2.75 millimeter needle, and I just ended up liking the way that the lace looked on the bigger needle size, so that's what I decided to do. And because I was knitting it at a slightly larger gauge, I had calculated out that I wanted to knit size 1 in order to get the measurements of about a size 2, and I knit everything to pattern for the size 1, including the number of rows from the underarm to the top of the front and the top of the back. So I followed exactly those row numbers, and I did measure to make sure that it was going to be about right, and compared it to like a more tight-fitting t-shirt that I already owned, and it was about the same in terms of that measurement from underarm to the top of the shoulder. So I knew that that was gonna work out pretty well. And other than that, I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. One thing I did notice, or something else I'll mention, I guess, is that for me, my front panel on one side, I think has 1 or 2 extra stitches than on this side. And I don't know how visible that will be, but maybe I could try to show. So on this side, there's kind of 2 or 3 knit columns after the end of the last eyelet here. Whereas on this side, there is maybe only one knit column. I think this maybe has to do with just me not being careful about where my beginning of round was set. I'm pretty sure that if you were to follow the pattern exactly in terms of putting the beginning of round exactly where she says in the pattern, that it would be even. Because I also, when you split for the front and back, there maybe was like one stitch that was like a knit two together or something like that. And maybe I did it on the wrong side, or I was kind of off by one stitch. But of course, this is something that as a knitter, you're the only one who's really gonna notice that. I don't think anyone else would notice. Although I do feel a little bit like this sleeve cap is just slightly over the edge of my shoulder, whereas this one's kind of right at the edge, and it is like a 1 to 2 stitch kind of difference. But this is my Fleur Tee, and I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. I guess I'll stand up one last time just to show it off. Yeah, really nice, and it was very fun to knit. So moving on to whips, this is my Sonya shirt. It is a bit wrinkled because it has been in my project bag, but this is a pattern by Paula Strict, and I am knitting mine in Lang Vaya, which is a 74% cotton, 16% wool, and 10% yak yarn, which is super soft and is, I think, maybe a heavier fingering weight. And I am knitting my Sonya shirt on 3.75 millimeter needles. And so far, I have finished the back panel, knit the 2 front panels, joined the front panels, and joined everything in the round. So now I am working, actually I also finished those. So what happens in this construction is that you first knit the back panel, then you pick up stitches for the 2 front panels, and the sleeve is actually just the combination of the back and the front panels, and I think there's a little bit of a sleeve edging that is knit after you're done, but this is already basically what the sleeve is going to look like. And once you join the front and the back at the bottom, then you do these center decreases. See if that is visible on camera or not in this black yarn, but you start doing decreases here. Let me see how to hold this. You start doing decreases to shape the bottom of the sleeve. So it's kind of like a bat wing or a dolman sleeve, maybe is what it's called. But I have already reached the point where I have finished my decreases. I think I just finished the decreases. So that is gonna be the whole of the under part of the sleeve. And now I'm just knitting in the round, and I will be knitting in the round to the length of the t-shirt. And after I finished knitting that, I think then there is some sleeve edging to do. The neckline, I actually don't even remember what kind of finishing is on the neckline, but maybe it's just some kind of rib. I'm not sure at all, so I don't remember. And I don't know also what the bottom finishing will be, but this is the progress that I have so far on this. I had to re-knit the front panels twice, and the funny thing about this is that if you have watched my previous episodes, you'll know that I first cast this on using a different yarn. It was Pasquale Pinta, and I had knit the back panel and both of the front panels on that version as well. One of the design features that is like very specific to this pattern is that there's this kind of, I mean, it's gonna be really hard to see in my black yarn, but there is this ridge that runs along kind of like the back shoulder. And it's the seam between the back panel and the front panel. But I just don't know exactly how it's supposed to be worked. And even now, I'm not sure if I have done it right or not, because the two sides look different. They don't look like the same. And I know it's going to be really hard to see on camera. But when I knit the first version, there was, when you're knitting the back panel, there's one row where you do a purl bump. So you purl instead of knit on the right side. And I didn't do that in my first version, which is just sitting here still. So here, if you look at the back panel and then the pickup for the front panel, it's basically flat. Like there's nothing going on there. But I realized that when I knit the back panel for this version, I never even put that purl bump in. So I did notice that when I was knitting my second version of it, that I wasn't reading the pattern carefully. So I did put the purl bump in when I was knitting the back panel here. And then when you pick up stitches for the front, I think maybe where I went wrong is that you're supposed to pick up stitches from a specific side, and maybe you're picking up stitches, you're supposed to pick up stitches from the wrong side. So what kind of turns up on the right side again is the edge of the back. I can sort of visualize it in my head, but I know I'm not explaining this super well. But because you're picking up stitches on the wrong side, which is kind of the inside of the sleeve, then the edge of the back comes to the right side. It like flips over. And I think that is what you see. But what I really don't understand is why my two sides look so different. And yeah, I don't know. I really don't know what happened. There are pretty careful instructions in the pattern in terms of picking up the stitches and also leaving in a lifeline on your back panel so that you can pick up those stitches more easily. There are diagrams in the pattern that I did not look at very carefully, so it may just be user error and the fact that I was not reading the pattern very carefully. But after knitting the front panels basically twice in this black version, 3 times if you count my first version, I still don't know that I've done it right. But at this point, I am not going to knit it again. So this is the way it's going to turn out. And I think in the black yarn, you also can't really tell that the edges look very different. Like, you know, on camera, I could see there's 2 ridges. So at least there is something that shows up. But the fact that they just are different just makes, I don't know what happened. But I'm making good progress on this. There's only basically stockinette in the round and the finishing that is left to do. So I imagine that this will go by pretty quickly and become a finished object that I can wear. So really excited about the Sonya shirt. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is a new cast on that I have. This is what I have so far. This is the High Falls pullover by Andrea Garn Knits, and I'm knitting mine in Issair Eco Baby. This is one of the yarns that I picked up at Brooklyn General Store when I was visiting New York. The other yarn that I picked up is also an Isager yarn, Alpaca 3. I'm jumping around, but this is the yarn that I'm using for the High Falls pullover, and it is a 68%, 32%, 68% alpaca and 32% cotton yarn. The sample that Andrea Garn knit is De Rerum Natura Candide, which is, I think, it definitely has cotton in it. I think it's a wool cotton blend, and she specifically says that if you want the kind of sweatshirt look that her sample has, that you would want to use something that has a little bit of cotton content. So that is why I chose this yarn that has the alpaca and the cotton. I don't think I have my swatches. So the pattern is supposed to be knit up with a sport weight yarn at a 22 stitch gauge. And this yarn is actually a DK weight gauge. So I knit it up using 2 needle sizes in my swatches. And I think I used a 4mm needle, and with the 4mm needle I was able to get gauge at 22 stitches, which is also what happened in my Nolita tank. I used a 4mm needle and got 22 stitches. But then I also tried swatching this pattern in 4.5mm needles, and that's what I ended up going with. But with the 4.5mm needles, the stitch gauge that I get with it is 20 stitches. So I am knitting this sweater slightly off gauge. The other thing about this sweater is that it is a drop shoulder sweater, and actually it's really cool. Andrea Garn Knits, the designer, she grades all of her patterns to both a women's sizing chart and a men's sizing chart. So there are 2 different fits that you can choose from, and yeah, I just think it's cool that she does that. But both of them are drop shoulders, and the drop shoulder is pretty standard in terms of kind of where it drops down to. I really want to make mine have less of a drop shoulder and add in a set-in sleeve. I don't know if it's really called a set-in sleeve, but I basically want to make a sleeve that is similar to this one on the Fleur Tee. Not as tight. I want this to be a slightly oversized sweater as well, but I just don't want the drop shoulder to be so drop shouldery. And I want to make it so that the sleeve cap is shaped with a little bit of short row shaping, and not just where with the drop shoulder I think you would just pick up stitches and then start knitting the sleeve straight. I want to make mine so that it's less of a drop shoulder and you do some short row shaping on the sleeve cap to shape the sleeve. So I'm knitting this both off gauge, and I want to adjust the pattern. So on my flight back from New York, it was delayed. I flew back on Thursday and there were storms in New York and New Jersey, so my flight was delayed. It ended up being delayed something like 5 hours. So I was in the airport for a very long time, and that's when I kind of decided that I wanted to modify this pattern. So I was there with my laptop and a notebook, and I was really trying to calculate out how many stitches I would need and how I would adjust the pattern to get the result that I want. It took probably most of my delay to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. There's actually so much to the design process when you have something like this where there's a pattern. I think the main things are that when you join the back and the front panels, you need them to be on the same row repeat so that the pattern will be consistent around. And I haven't worked out any of how I'm gonna do the set and sleeve at all, but I figured that by that point I'll have the back and the front panels and everything joined up, so I'll be able to see how it sits and how much shaping I'm gonna need on the sleeve cap. It was really fun to work on the math to figure out how many stitches I would need and everything like that. And then I did cast this on right before I got onto my flight, and I basically was able to finish knitting one of these 50-gram balls of yarn on the flight. So this is what I have so far of the back panel. Yeah, so I think there will be a lot of math left to do to figure this out, but it has been really fun to kind of think about, I guess, the construction of it and do the knitting math. So I think this is going to be really fun, and I love this pattern, so excited to continue to work on this one. The next thing that I'll talk about before I get to the other yarn that I acquired is my progress, oh, things are sticking, on the sweater that I'm knitting for my sister. So this is a sweater that I basically cast on yesterday, and I've actually decided that I'm knitting this sweater as part of the I Make Sweaters Cal, which is hosted by Colina Makes and What Mariel Made, who are both Bay Area knitters and creators. So this knit along it started yesterday, which was June 20th, and it will go till September 20th. So it is a summer knit along, and it is for making anything really, but it's called the I Make Sweaters knit along, and it's been fun to hear everyone's introductions in the Slack channel. I think there's a lot of people joining for the knit along, so I'm sure that will be fun to see everyone's progress. This sweater is knit in Woolfolk Far. So this is the yarn. And I showed some swatches of this on my last episode. And I had said my sister wanted a sweater using like a pretty large stitch gauge. But with this yarn, which is I think a worsted weight, the biggest gauge that I could get with it is like a 15 stitch gauge, and this is maybe like a 15 to 16 stitch gauge. And the other thing about this is that I am making this sweater with no pattern. After doing all of the math for the high falls pullover, I then felt really confident that I was going to be able to figure out just like a regular drop shoulder sweater. I think I've knit enough following this similar construction where I started with this back panel, and then from the back panel I'm going to pick up sleeves along the fronts and then join everything in the round, and then pick up for sleeves and knit the sleeves, that I felt pretty confident that I would be able to just figure it out as I go, or just to make the pattern. One cool thing about the back panel is that I did a tiny bit of short row shaping in order to make this back neck slightly curved. And that was something that I was looking at, basically a sweatshirt that I own, and saw that the back neck kind of scoops down in that way. And I thought, oh, I can definitely do that with like a couple of short rows. So I was able to do that, and it was really fun to just knit on this without a pattern. When I was knitting this, I first started with trying to increase on the right side rows only. And I realized that like the rate of increase was going to be too slow, and it wasn't going to give like the shape of the shaping that I needed. So then I ripped back, and then now I'm increasing on both the right side and the wrong side in order to get this back panel. And it is kind of fun to just knit as I go, and basically just knit to the width that I felt like, you know, would kind of give like a drop shoulder effect. I don't know how this is gonna go, and I'm not really taking great notes or anything like that, or doing a lot of calculations beforehand. But I think it's been fun. And I think with this one, because there's no pattern, it's going to be a lot simpler in terms of not needing to calculate things out beforehand, because everything is in stockinette, and I don't need to worry about how many rows there are really at all, or how many stitches there are. I think I'll be able to just, when I'm picking up stitches for the front, pick up one for every column, and I think that will be like just the number of stitches I need. Like I don't even need to necessarily know how many increases I had here. This is the first time that I'm knitting something without a pattern like this, and I mean I casted this on yesterday, so it's been really fun so far on my one day that I've knit on it, and I am excited to work on it more. Holding it up now, I wonder if it is, I think it's wide enough. Yeah, I think it's wide enough to do the drop shoulder. I definitely will block it when I knit a little bit more of this back panel down. And then, yeah, I'll keep you all updated on the progress for this sweater. It has been fun to work on. So those are my, let me think, yeah, I think these are the only two cast-ons that I have since my last episode. But I do have three more swatches and future project plans that I want to show you all. The first one is this Issayer Alpaca 3 that I also picked up at Brooklyn General Store. This is a 50% alpaca, 50% wool yarn, and it is, I don't know what weight of yarn this is, but I think it would be considered bulkier than a worsted, so maybe like an Aran weight yarn. It doesn't really say on the label, but the pattern that I want to knit with this yarn is the Tuileries Cardigan by Knits Pour Moi. So this is a pattern that I have seen on Instagram, and I am really excited about this design. The designer also has the Tuileries Polo, which is also knit in this pattern, but at a much smaller gauge, and that is a polo version. This is the cardigan version. The cardigan version has a much bigger stitch gauge, and is a drop shoulder top down cardigan with I think a ribbed button band. I knit 2 swatches on 2 needle sizes. I think this one was a 5.5 millimeter needle, and this one was a 6 millimeter needle. I really need to write down the needle sizes and the gauge for all of my swatches, and I saw someone basically write them. I just need to write it down on a piece of paper and then tie it to the swatch so that I don't forget. Because even with the swatches that I knit for the sweater that I'm knitting for my sister, I had forgotten what needle sizes I had used for those. So it kind of became useless because I didn't even know which needle sizes it was. And I went back to my previous podcast because I was like, maybe I mentioned it on the podcast, but I didn't. So now that is just lost information. But for this cast on, I actually didn't swatch again. And I just decided to go with, 6 millimeter needles. So now I'm wondering if this is even correct, if this is like the 5.5 and this is the 6. I know they're like one size off, so it could also be that this is 6 millimeters and this one is 6.5 millimeters. But I think I've been swatching so much that I really need to take better notes and write down what needles I'm using for these so that I don't have to re-swatch these in the future. But this is the yarn that I will be using for my Tuileries cardigan. One other yarn acquisition that I got, this one was not from Brooklyn General Store, but I got this online. This is Sorella yarn in the color The Well in the silk sock base, which is 50% superwash merino and 50% silk. So Sorella Yarns is a hand dyer, and I just started following her on Instagram, and the way that she does her Instagram marketing, I think is so good, because she'll post a picture or like one color of a collection every single day. And I think she was posting about her Summer in London collection last time I think I mentioned it during my last podcast, but I had been following those posts so religiously just because they would come out every day and I loved seeing the new colors. But this is not one of the yarns that's in one of her more recent collections. I think it's a color of the week or something like that. But I saw it online on her website, and it is this like white yarn with this blue and green, really light variegated colorway with the blue and the green. Let me see if I have, yes. I have these 2 swatches, and I think they're a little bit crinkly because I traveled with them, but this one and this one. I also feel like I'm gonna forget what needles I used for these, but okay, I know that this tighter one is knit up on a US 3 or 3.25 millimeter needles, and this one is knit up on 3.5 millimeter needles. And originally for this yarn, I was thinking I wanted to make the Fabienne Tee by Laine. Camera's overheating, so had to take a break, but I think I was saying that for this yarn, originally I wanted to knit the Fabienne Tee, and the Fabienne Tee is knit up at a 27 or 28 stitch gauge, so it is like a fingering like a normal fingering weight gauge, I guess, which is something like this 3.25 millimeter needle swatch. But I think I like the way that the variegated color looks more with slightly larger stitches. So I changed plans, and the pattern that I think I'm going to use for this yarn is going to be Sari Nordland's Penelope Tee, which I have printed out here. So this is a tank that has a lace edge along the bottom and also has this row of eyelets with an I-cord tie. And I did do a swatch of the lace in the yarn, and I think it's so beautiful. I have really been enjoying knitting lace. I think it is really fun to knit, and it is in some ways easier to knit, I think, than cables, or it's slightly less work because you don't have to move stitches around, and instead you're mostly doing yarn overs or knitting multiple stitches together. But the extent of my lace knitting really has just been this kind of eyelet before. So this Fleur Tee is, I'm pretty sure this Fleur Tee is the first thing that I've ever knit with any kind of eyelet. And I loved it so much that now I have the High Falls pullover and the Tuileries cardigan. Both of these have eyelets in the design. And this is the first pattern that is more of a complicated lace pattern. And I followed the chart to knit this swatch, and it was so fun to knit. I'm really excited about this project, and I think probably in the future I would be interested in knitting some more complicated lace patterns too. I really feel like I'm such a process knitter because I guess it's when I'm thinking about more of the lace yoke t-shirts. Those I don't really think I would wear, but now I think I would wear them because I want to knit them, if that makes sense. But this pattern for the Penelope Tee, I feel like the lace is just so pretty, and it's kind of understated because it really is just around the bottom hem that you have this lace pattern. And I feel like the slight variegation in this yarn is also just beautiful with this little bit of lace too. So I'm really excited to work on this Penelope top. And okay, I think I've been talking for a long time and this is getting long, but there is one last swatch that I wanted to show, which is it's a pattern from Laine magazine. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. This is the summer 2025 edition of Laine magazine. I got myself a subscription for my birthday this year, and this just came in, and I have loved looking at the patterns, but the one that I did the swatch for is the pattern that I'm most excited about, which is this sweater, the ice cream sweater, or cardigan, I guess, ice cream cardigan, by Maria Gomez, and it is knit up in a single strand of mohair, and it's just this really light summer cardigan, and it looks just so beautiful. I think the stitch pattern was really interesting, and it was really hard for me to see what that stitch pattern was when you're just like looking at the picture, but then you can flip to the back and see exactly how that pattern is made. and it is kind of interesting. So it's kind of this checkerboard where you have broken rib and also like a stockinette section that is alternating in this checkerboard pattern, but on this like single strand of lace weight yarn, it just looks like slightly textured, and I just find that the stitch pattern and the way that it looks in the single strand is so cool, and I'm really excited about this pattern. This yarn was a yarn that I picked up earlier this year at the Bay Area Yarn Crawl. This one is Chandrak Silk Mohair. This is a hand-dyed silk mohair, and I had done like an earlier swatch of this. This one has 2 strands of mohair, whereas this one only has 1. And I think like I like the color saturation when there's 2 strands. With 1 strand, this pink color is like really, really light. But I also don't have that much of this yarn. I think I got 3 skeins. So if I were to hold it double, I don't necessarily have enough for something that is long sleeved. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I want to knit the ice cream pattern. I think that this swatch is so pretty, and that cardigan is really pretty, and I'm very excited to knit that. So that was one of the patterns that's in this Laine magazine. So I am excited to announce that we're going to be having another giveaway on this channel, and the winner will get this issue of Laine magazine summer 2025. I think this is also issue number 25. I have another copy that I am going to be sending to one of my viewers. So if you are a viewer, please subscribe and leave a comment on what summer plans you're excited for and which summer pattern you're most excited to knit. And I'm also going to link the Ravelry page for this magazine, which has a preview of all of the patterns that are in this magazine. So if you want to check that out, and also leave down below which pattern from this magazine you're most excited about, that would be great. Thanks to everyone who has watched so far, and I hope you have enjoyed spending your time with me, and I will see you all next time.